A millionaire sees his 6-year-old daughter cleaning floors. At his while guests sip champagne and cameras flash, his little girl is on her knees, scrubbing a wine stain in a janitor's uniform. And when he asks her why, she says something no father should ever hear. That's when everything changes, because the woman he was about to marry isn't who she claimed to be, and his daughter isn't just a child in the background. She's the one who's about to show him what real love, real family, and real loyalty look like. What kind of bride would humiliate a child like this? And what will this father do when he finds out the truth? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the Hayes vineyard, turning dewdrops into tiny diamonds scattered over the grape leaves. Birds called to each other through the crisp air, their songs echoing across the perfectly trimmed lawns that surrounded the estate. The peaceful scene was broken only by the steady rhythm of running feet and the whir of bicycle wheels. Ethan Hayes jogged along the gravel path between the vine rows, his breathing steady and measured. Beside him, his 8-year-old daughter Lily pedaled her blue bicycle, occasionally racing ahead before circling back to him with a grin. "Bet you can't catch me, Dad," Lily called out, her dark ponytail bouncing as she picked up speed. Ethan's face broke into a wide smile. "Oh yeah?" He quickened his pace, making exaggerated huffing sounds that sent Lily into fits of giggles. "Just wait until I get my second wind." Their laughter carried across the morning air as they wove through the vineyard. These early morning runs had become their special ritual over the past year, a time when they could just be themselves without any pressure or pretense. After their workout, they headed back to the main house. The massive stone building rose before them, its windows gleaming in the morning light. Lily hopped off her bike at the garage, and Ethan helped her park it properly. "Race you to the kitchen," she challenged, already darting toward the house. "Hey, no fair," Ethan called after her, jogging to catch up. "I'm all worn out from our run." They found Maria, their housekeeper, already setting out breakfast. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread. Lily climbed onto her usual stool at the counter while Ethan grabbed them both some water. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes, Miss Lily," Maria greeted them warmly. "The usual breakfast?" Before either could answer, the click of heels on marble announced another arrival. Vanessa swept into the kitchen wearing pale pink silk loungewear, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She approached Ethan, placing a quick kiss on his cheek. "Good morning, darling," she said, then turned to survey the kitchen. Her gaze landed on Lily, who was pouring milk over her cereal. "Oh, sweetie, are you having that sugary stuff again? You know how it makes you so energetic." Lily's spoon paused halfway to her mouth, her expression uncertain. Ethan, toweling off his neck after their run, missed the slight edge in Vanessa's voice. "It's her favorite," he said easily, "and she burned plenty of energy on our morning ride." The doorbell chimed and Maria went to answer it. Moments later, Claire Matthews walked in, carrying a leather portfolio and a wrapped package. The wedding planner's warm smile and casual elegance in her simple blue dress provided an immediate contrast to Vanessa's polished perfection. "Good morning, everyone," Claire said cheerfully. "I hope I'm not too early. I brought the final timeline for tomorrow's festivities." Claire. Lily's face lit up at the sight of the wedding planner who had become a familiar presence over the past months. "Hi there, Lily," Claire replied, then held out the package she'd brought. "I saw this and thought of you." Lily carefully unwrapped the gift, her eyes widening as she revealed a beautiful leather-bound sketchpad with her name embossed in gold letters on the cover. Inside, the pages were thick and creamy, perfect for drawing. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, running her fingers over the cover. "Thank you so much." Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "How thoughtful," she said, her tone carrying a note that made Claire glance up. "Though we wouldn't want art supplies to distract from tomorrow's celebrations." "Oh, I'm sure Lily knows when it's appropriate to draw," Claire responded evenly, meeting Vanessa's gaze. Ethan, still focused on his post-workout protein shake, nodded. "Lily's very responsible with her art. She gets that from her mother." A brief silence followed his words. Vanessa's expression tightened almost imperceptibly before she smiled brightly. Well, shall we review those timelines, Claire? We want everything to be perfect for tomorrow. The day passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. As evening settled over the vineyard, Ethan stood in his study, looking out over the darkening grounds. Vanessa joined him, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "Darling," she said softly, "I've been meaning to talk to you about something." Ethan turned to face her. "What is it?" "It's about Lily," Vanessa said, her voice gentle but concerned. "I'm worried about how she's adjusting to all these changes. The way she clings to certain people, the wedding planner, for instance." Unknown to them both, Lily sat on the stairs just outside the study, her new sketchpad clutched tightly to her chest. She'd come down to show her father a drawing she'd made, but stopped when she heard her name. "Claire's been kind to her," Ethan said. "That's a good thing, isn't it?" "Of course, darling," Vanessa replied. "But shouldn't we be encouraging her to move forward? To accept our new family dynamic? I just want us all to be happy together." Lily's fingers tightened on her sketchpad, her young mind trying to understand the worried tone in Vanessa's voice when she talked about Claire being nice to her. She didn't understand what was wrong with liking the wedding planner who always smiled at her, and remembered the kinds of things she enjoyed. "Lily's a resilient kid," Ethan assured Vanessa. "She'll be fine. We just need to give her time." "If you're sure," Vanessa said softly, "I just want what's best for all of us." On the stairs, Lily sat very still, her confusion giving way to a hollow feeling in her stomach. She looked down at the drawing she'd made, a picture of her father, herself, and Claire laughing together at the vineyard. Carefully, she closed the sketchpad, rose from the stairs, and tiptoed back to her room, leaving her father and soon-to-be stepmother to their conversation. The morning of the wedding arrived with a flurry of activity at the Hayes estate. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the first delivery trucks began rolling up the long driveway. The peaceful vineyard transformed into a carefully orchestrated chaos of florists arranging centerpieces, caterers setting up serving stations, and photographers testing light angles among the vine rows. Inside the main house, footsteps echoed through the halls as workers carried chairs, tables, and decorations. The air smelled of fresh flowers and coffee, mixed with the occasional whiff of hairspray from the makeshift salon set up in one of the guest rooms. Lily woke early, too excited to sleep. She sat cross-legged on her window seat, watching the activity below with wide eyes. She'd been to weddings before, but never one this big, and never one at her own home. The vineyard she loved was transforming into something magical, with white fabric draped between the trees and crystal chandeliers being hung from sturdy branches. Her attention drifted to her closet, where her special dress hung waiting. Her heart beat faster just thinking about it. The dress had been her mother's final gift to her, chosen during one of their last shopping trips together. They'd spent hours in the boutique, her mother weak but smiling as Lily twirled in different options. When they found this one, her mother's eyes had lit up. "For your daddy's wedding day," she had said, smoothing Lily's hair. "So you'll have something from me when that day comes." Lily couldn't wait any longer. She jumped up from her perch and ran to the closet, pulling out the dress with careful hands. The cream-colored tulle was just as beautiful as she remembered, soft and light as a cloud. Tiny embroidered daisies dotted the fabric, each one stitched by hand. Her mother had loved daisies. Standing before her mirror, Lily held the dress up against herself. It would fit perfectly now. Her mother had bought it a size too big, knowing Lily would grow. The skirt would twirl just right when she scattered rose petals down the aisle. She had just slipped the dress over her head when her bedroom door opened without warning. Vanessa swept in, followed by her personal assistant who was tapping rapidly on a tablet. Lily froze mid-twirl, suddenly feeling shy in her special dress. "Oh, sweetie," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes sharp. "What are you wearing?" It's my flower girl dress," Lily explained softly. "Mom picked it out." "Did she?" Vanessa's smile stayed fixed in place. "That was thoughtful, but I'm afraid it won't work with our color palette. Everything has been coordinated perfectly. Vogue is covering the wedding, you know. We can't have anything clash." The assistant nodded without looking up from her tablet. The photographers are very particular about maintaining the aesthetic. But Lily's fingers clutched the soft tool. Mom chose it special. Now, darling, Vanessa stepped closer, her expensive perfume filling the air. You want Daddy's wedding to be perfect, don't you? We can save that dress for another time. She turned to her assistant, who produced a folded bundle of gray fabric. Here's what we've chosen instead. Lily took the bundle automatically, her arms feeling heavy. As she unfolded it, her heart sank further. The dress, if it could be called that, was plain gray cotton, shaped like a simple shift. A white name tag was pinned to the front. I don't understand, Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. It's temporary, sweetheart, Vanessa assured her, checking her diamond watch. Just for the setup and photos. We want everything to look clean and coordinated while the press is here. You can change for the reception. If you're very good and don't make a fuss, I'll make sure you get an extra piece of cake. Lily stood still, looking between the beautiful cream dress she wore and the gray uniform in her hands. Her mother's dress caught the morning light, making the embroidered daisies shimmer. The gray outfit looked like something the cleaning staff wore. Will Daddy like this better? She asked quietly. Your father trusts my judgment on these things, Vanessa replied smoothly. Now, be a good girl and change quickly. We have a very tight schedule to keep. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and let's keep this our little secret, shall we? No need to upset anyone on such a special day. The door closed behind Vanessa and her assistant, leaving Lily alone in the sudden silence of her room. She stood there for a long moment, still wearing her mother's carefully chosen dress. A tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. She didn't want to get the dress wet. With trembling fingers, Lily unzipped the cream dress and stepped out of it. She took extra care folding it, smoothing each crease, making sure none of the delicate daisies were crushed. Kneeling beside her bed, she gently slid the folded dress underneath, pushing it far back where it would be safe. The gray uniform felt stiff and scratchy against her skin. The name tag pinched where it was pinned. When she looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The girl looking back at her could have been anyone, just another worker helping with the wedding. Lily wiped her eyes one more time and walked slowly down to the main preparation area. The bustling crowd of workers paid no attention to her as she made her way through the chaos. She was just another gray uniform among many. Only Claire, arranging flowers at one of the tables, seemed to notice her. The wedding planner's warm smile faltered as she took in Lily's outfit, her brow furrowing in recognition of the staff uniform. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, one of the photographers called her over urgently about a lighting issue. Claire hesitated, clearly torn, but the photographer was insistent. She gave Lily a concerned look before being pulled away into the crowd, leaving the little girl standing alone in her gray dress amid the swirl of wedding preparations. The late morning sun streamed through the estate's tall windows, casting long shadows across marble floors now crowded with wedding guests. In the main hall, photographers directed groups into poses while makeup artists darted in for touch-ups between shots. The air hummed with excitement and nervous energy. Ethan stood with his groomsmen near the grand staircase, adjusting his bow tie for what felt like the 100th time. The photographer waved him over for another series of shots. Just a few more, Mr. Hayes, the photographer called out cheerfully. The lighting is perfect right now. Meanwhile, Lily hovered uncertainly at the edges of the activity, trying to stay out of the way as servers rushed past with trays of champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. She felt invisible in her gray uniform, which had grown increasingly uncomfortable as the morning wore on. One of Vanessa's coordinators spotted her and frowned. You shouldn't be in here, the woman said, checking her clipboard. Staff needs to wait in the service hallway until the ceremony. She pointed toward a narrow corridor off the kitchen. Lily opened her mouth to explain that she wasn't staff, that she was supposed to be the flower girl, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded and made her way to the service hallway, her small shoes clicking against the floor. The hallway was dimly lit and narrow, lined with storage closets and extra chairs. A few actual staff members gave her curious looks as they passed, probably wondering why such a young girl was wearing their uniform. Lily pressed herself against the wall, trying to take up as little space as possible. The minutes ticked by slowly. She could hear laughter and conversation from the main areas, the occasional burst of camera flashes visible under the door. Her father's voice carried sometimes, making her heart ache. She wanted to run to him to tell him about the dress, about being sent away, but Vanessa's words echoed in her mind. She didn't want to ruin his special day. A server rounded the corner quickly, carrying a loaded tray of red wine glasses. He was looking over his shoulder, calling something to someone in the kitchen, when he nearly collided with Lily. She stumbled backward, bumping the tray. Time seemed to slow as the glasses wobbled, then tipped. The crash was deafening in the narrow space. Dark red wine splashed across the floor and up the walls, soaking into Lily's gray uniform. Shards of crystal scattered across the tile like ice. The server steadied himself, looking horrified. "I'm so sorry," Lily whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to." "What is going on here?" Vanessa's assistant appeared suddenly, her heels clicking sharply on the wet floor. She took in the scene with cold eyes, dismissing the server with a sharp wave. "Go get more wine. Now." The server hurried away, leaving Lily alone with the assistant. The woman's perfectly made-up face twisted with displeasure as she surveyed the damage. "Of all the clumsy, thoughtless things," she hissed, reaching into a nearby supply closet. She pulled out a cloth and thrust it at Lily. "Clean this up immediately. Every drop." Lily's hands trembled as she took the cloth. "I'm sorry. It was an accident." "Accidents have consequences." The assistant cut her off, leaning down close. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as the broken glass on the floor. "No cake for clumsy little girls who make messes. And I'm sure your father won't want to hug you when you're covered in wine stains, will he? Better get scrubbing if you want to be presentable for the ceremony." Tears blurred Lily's vision as she dropped to her knees, the wine immediately soaking through the thin fabric. She began scrubbing frantically at the floor, her small hands turning red from the effort. The assistant stood over her for a moment longer before walking away, her heels clicking a sharp rhythm down the hall. The wine had spread in a wide puddle, seeping into the grout between tiles. Lily scrubbed harder, her chest tight with panic. She couldn't miss the ceremony. She couldn't disappoint her father. The cloth was soon stained dark red and her hands were raw from the rough fabric, but still she scrubbed. Tears fell freely now, mixing with the wine on the floor. Her uniform was soaked through, the gray fabric now a mottled purple. She could hear the ceremony music starting up faintly in the distance. Time was running out. The service door opened, letting in a burst of sound from the main hall. Footsteps approached, then stopped abruptly. Lily kept scrubbing, too afraid to look up. "Lily?" Her father's voice, soft with disbelief. She flinched at the sound, her hands freezing mid-scrub. Slowly, she raised her head to see Ethan kneeling beside her, his tuxedo knees inches from the wine-soaked floor. His face was unreadable as he took in her appearance, the staff uniform, the wine stains, her red raw hands. "What happened?" he asked gently, reaching for her trembling hands. "Why are you wearing this? Where's your dress?" Lily's lower lip quivered. She wanted to tell him everything, about the dress her mother chose, about being sent to wait with the staff, about the accident and the threat of no hugs. But fear kept the words locked in her throat. She just stared at him, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Ethan remained perfectly still, his eyes moving from her face to the name tag pinned to her chest, to the wine-soaked uniform that was clearly meant for cleaning staff. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed soft when he spoke again. "Lily, sweetheart, please tell me what happened." She flinched again at his gentle tone, her hands clutching the wine-stained cloth tighter. Ethan fell silent, watching his daughter kneel in a puddle of wine, wearing a staff uniform instead of the special dress they'd talked about for weeks. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Ethan gently scooped Lily into his arms, not caring that the wine from her uniform was seeping into his tuxedo. She felt so small against his chest, her whole body trembling like a frightened bird. Without a word, he carried her down the hallway to the nearest guest room, kicking the door shut behind them with his foot. The guest room was cool and quiet, a sanctuary away from the bustling wedding preparations. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, casting soft shadows on the cream-colored walls. Ethan set Lily down carefully on the plush armchair by the window. "Let me see your hands, sweetheart," he said softly, kneeling in front of her. Her tiny hands were red and raw from scrubbing, and his heart clenched at the sight. He went to the ensuite bathroom and returned with a soft towel and a glass of water. Gently, he dried her hands, careful not to press too hard on the tender skin. Lily watched him silently, hiccuping occasionally as she tried to control her tears. When he held the water glass to her lips, she took small sips, her breathing still uneven. "There we go," Ethan murmured, setting the glass aside. He stayed kneeling in front of her chair, making himself smaller, less intimidating. "Can you tell me what happened? Why aren't you wearing your flower girl dress?" Lily's lower lip trembled. She looked down at her wine-stained uniform, fingers plucking at the scratchy fabric. Vanessa said it wouldn't match," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Wouldn't match what?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice gentle even as something cold settled in his stomach. "The color palette." Lily stumbled over the unfamiliar word. "She came to my room this morning with her helper. They said I had to wear this instead." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "They said it was temporary, and if I was good, I could have cake later." Ethan's hands tightened on the armrests of the chair, but he forced them to relax when he saw Lily flinch. "What else happened, sweetheart?" Once the words started, they came rushing out like a broken dam. "They made me wait in the back hallway with the other workers," Lily sobbed. "And when I spilled the wine, the lady said I couldn't have any cake and that you wouldn't want to hug me anymore because I was dirty." Each word felt like a physical blow to Ethan's chest. But there was more. He could see it in the way Lily hunched her shoulders, making herself smaller. "Is there something else?" he prompted gently. Lily nodded, her chin quivering. "I heard Vanessa talking to her friend on the phone last night. She said I was just a charity case, and that once you were married, she'd make sure I went to boarding school so I wouldn't embarrass her at parties." The cold feeling in Ethan's stomach spread throughout his entire body. He thought about all the little moments he'd dismissed. Vanessa's subtle criticisms of Lily's clothes, her insistence that children should be seen and not heard at social functions, the way she'd steered Lily away from family photos during the engagement party. Without a word, he stood and walked to the guest room closet. When he opened it, there it was, exactly where he'd hidden it the day before. The cream-colored tulle dress with tiny embroidered daisies that Sarah had picked out before she passed away. He'd moved it here as a backup, just in case something happened to it in Lily's room. "Look what I found," he said softly, turning back to Lily with the dress held carefully in his hands. Lily's eyes went wide. "Mommy's dress," she whispered, reaching out to touch the soft tulle. "That's right." Ethan laid the dress across the bed and knelt in front of Lily again. "Would you like to wear this instead?" She nodded eagerly, then hesitated. But Vanessa said..." "Vanessa was wrong," Ethan said firmly but gently. "This is your special dress, picked out by your mom, and you're going to look beautiful in it." He helped Lily out of the wine-stained uniform and into the flower girl dress. The cream-colored fabric settled around her like a cloud, the embroidered daisies catching the sunlight. Despite the tears and wine stains on her face, despite her red hands and messy hair, she looked like an angel. "Now how about we fix your hair?" Ethan asked, guiding her to sit at the vanity. He picked up a brush and began working it gently through her tangled curls. Years of practice had made him an expert at this. He'd learned to braid hair watching countless YouTube tutorials after Sarah died, determined to make sure Lily always felt beautiful and cared for. As he worked, he could see Lily's shoulders gradually relaxing in the mirror. Her breathing steadied, and the trembling finally stopped. He separated her hair into 3 sections and began to braid, his fingers moving with careful precision. "You know something, Lily?" he said as he worked. "You belong here more than anyone else today. This is your home, your family's vineyard, the grapes we grow, the wine we make. It's all part of your heritage. Your mom helped plant some of these vines." Lily's eyes met his in the mirror. "Really?" "Really." He secured the braid with a ribbon that matched her dress perfectly. "You're not a charity case. You're my daughter, and I love you more than anything in this world." Lily turned in her chair and threw her arms around his neck. Ethan held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with the lingering smell of wine. Outside, the first notes of the ceremony music began to drift through the window, the string quartet warming up for the processional. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "Do I still have to go to the ceremony?" Ethan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. Sarah's eyes, full of trust and love. "We are going to go out there," he said, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. "But not like everyone expects. Not like Vanessa planned." Hand in hand, Ethan and Lily stepped out of the guest room into the sunlit hallway. Lily's cream-colored dress swished softly against the polished hardwood floors, the tiny embroidered daisies catching the light. Her braid hung neatly down her back, tied with a matching ribbon that bounced gently as she walked. Ethan's mind was racing, but he kept his exterior calm for Lily's sake. His shoes clicked steadily against the floor as he guided them away from the main ceremony area, taking a slight detour toward the large white catering tent set up on the east lawn. The sounds of clinking glasses and bustling staff grew louder as they approached. Inside the tent, the air was cool from portable air conditioning units, and the scent of fresh-baked bread and herbs filled the space. Staff members in crisp black uniforms moved efficiently between prep stations, arranging delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver platters. Ethan spotted Marcus, the head of catering staff, directing a team near the dessert station. He was a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes who had worked events at the vineyard for years. "Marcus," Ethan called softly, not wanting to disturb the workflow. "Could I have a moment?" The catering director turned, his professional smile faltering slightly when he saw Lily's reddened eyes and Ethan's intense expression. "Of course, Mr. Hayes." He stepped away from his staff, moving closer to speak privately. Ethan kept his voice low and steady. "I need to know who instructed my daughter to clean up a wine spill in the service hallway." He felt Lily's small hand tighten in his. Marcus's face showed genuine confusion, then concern as he glanced at Lily. "Sir, none of my staff would ever—" He paused, shifting uncomfortably. "It was Ms. Carter's personal assistant, the one in the navy suit. She's been giving instructions to my staff all morning as well." Ethan nodded slowly, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "And the uniform Lily was wearing? That wasn't from our team, sir. We would never—" Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Children are not permitted to handle cleaning supplies or service items at any of our events. It's against policy and basic decency." "Thank you, Marcus." Ethan's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the courtesy. "Could you direct me to the security office? I'd like to review some footage." Marcus provided quick directions to the security hub, set up in a converted wine storage room. As they walked across the grounds, guests were beginning to arrive, their cheerful voices carrying across the manicured lawn. Ladies in flowing summer dresses and men in sharp suits gathered near the champagne station, crystal glasses catching the late morning sun. Lily's steps slowed as they passed the growing crowd. Ethan squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're just taking a little detour." As they rounded the corner of the main building, Claire appeared, carrying a clipboard and speaking into a headset. She stopped short when she saw them, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Lily in her original dress. The event planner's gaze moved from the cream-colored tulle to Lily's more relaxed expression, then to Ethan's controlled demeanor. A small, warm smile crossed Claire's face as she met Lily's eyes. She gave the girl a subtle wink before continuing past them, not asking questions, but radiating quiet support. Lily's shoulders relaxed a fraction more, and she managed a tiny smile in return. The security office was cool and dim, monitors displaying various angles of the property. 2 security team members sat at their stations, both looking up as Ethan and Lily entered. "Mr. Hayes," the senior officer Jim greeted them. "What can we do for you?" "I need to review the footage from the service hallway camera from about 20 minutes ago," Ethan said. "Specifically near the wine storage entrance." Jim nodded, typing quickly on his keyboard. "Yes, sir. We can pull that up on the tablet for you," He reached for a nearby iPad, quickly accessing the security feed and scanning backward to the correct timestamp. Ethan knelt down to Lily's level. "Sweetheart, would you mind waiting just outside the door with Officer Sarah? I need to check something quickly." Sarah, the junior security officer, stood up with a warm smile. "We can look at the roses in the courtyard," she offered, holding out her hand to Lily. "They're blooming beautifully today." Once Lily was safely out of earshot, Ethan accepted the tablet from Jim. The footage was clear, showing the service hallway in sharp detail. He watched as Lily appeared in frame, looking small and lost in the gray uniform. The wine spill happened exactly as she'd described, a simple accident as a server rushed past with an overloaded tray. Then Vanessa's assistant entered the frame, her navy suit immaculate, her expression hard as she thrust the cleaning cloth at Lily. But what made Ethan's hand curl into a tight fist was the figure standing in the shadowed doorway behind them. Vanessa herself, watching silently as her assistant berated a 7-year-old girl, doing nothing to stop it. The tablet trembled slightly in Ethan's grip, but his voice remained steady as he asked, "Could you save this footage, please? And any other interactions between my daughter and Ms. Carter's assistant from this morning?" "Of course, sir," Jim replied. His own expression hardened as he watched the scene. "We'll have it ready whenever you need it." Ethan handed back the tablet, his movements controlled despite the storm brewing inside him. "Thank you. I'll be back shortly." He found Lily and Sarah admiring the pink roses climbing the courtyard trellis, the security officer pointing out a tiny hummingbird flitting between the blooms. The sight of his daughter's fascinated expression, so pure and innocent, made his heart ache even more. Walking back toward the main house, Ethan slipped into the groom's suite. The room was empty, his groomsmen presumably mingling with the arriving guests. He sat heavily in one of the leather chairs, his mind replaying the security footage. Not just the cruel words and actions, but the calculated silence of the woman he'd been about to marry. His hand curled into a fist again, but he kept his breathing steady. There would be time for anger later. Right now, he needed to think clearly. For Lily, for himself, for the memory of Sarah and everything she'd wanted for their daughter. Through the window, he could hear the string quartet beginning to tune their instruments. The ceremony would be starting soon, but not the one everyone was expecting. Not anymore. The late afternoon sun cast golden rays through the vineyard's twisted vines, creating dappled shadows on the grass beneath the ivy-draped archway. Rows of white chairs held over 200 guests, their faces turned expectantly toward the entrance. The string quartet's music swelled, their notes floating on the warm breeze as the wedding march began. Vanessa appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white couture. Her gown, a masterpiece of French lace and silk, caught the light with every graceful step. The fitted bodice gave way to layers of delicate tulle that seemed to float around her as she moved. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, secured with pearl pins that matched her grandmother's necklace. Phone cameras flashed from every angle as she glided forward, her smile practiced and perfect. Each step was precisely timed to the music, her bouquet of white roses held at exactly the right height. The guests murmured appreciatively. This was the sort of bride that belonged in magazines, the kind that made everything look effortless. At the altar, Ethan stood straight and tall in his tailored tuxedo, his expression unreadable. His hand was wrapped protectively around Lily's smaller one as she stood beside him, her cream-colored dress with its embroidered daisies moving gently in the breeze. Her bare feet pressed into the cool grass, grounding her against the nervous energy flowing through the crowd. The string quartet's final notes hung in the air as Vanessa reached the altar. Her eyes flickered briefly to Lily, registering the original dress, and something hard flashed across her features before disappearing behind her smile. The muscles in her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her composure, turning to face Ethan with practiced adoration. From her position near the side aisle, Claire watched the scene unfold. Her clipboard was tucked discreetly behind her back, but her attention was focused entirely on the dynamic playing out before her. She noticed how Vanessa's fingers gripped her bouquet a fraction too tightly, how Ethan's shoulders remained tense despite his calm exterior, how Lily pressed closer to her father's side. The officiant, A distinguished older man in traditional robes stepped forward and began the ceremony. His voice carried clearly across the gathered crowd as he spoke of love, commitment, and the joining of two lives. Vanessa reached for Ethan's free hand, her manicured fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that looked intimate but felt mechanical. Sunlight caught the massive diamond on Vanessa's engagement ring as she adjusted her grip on Ethan's hand. Her thumb stroked across his knuckles in what appeared to be a loving gesture, but there was something possessive in the way she held on, as if marking her territory. The ceremony continued, flowing through the traditional readings and prayers. The vineyard's hills rolled away behind them, rows of grapes stretching toward the horizon. A light breeze carried the scent of roses from the nearby gardens, mixing with the subtle fragrance of Vanessa's expensive perfume. Claire shifted her weight slightly, her trained eye catching the small details others might miss. The way Vanessa's smile never quite reached her eyes, the protective angle of Ethan's body toward Lily, the slight tremor in Lily's hand as she held onto her father's fingers. Years of coordinating weddings had taught Claire to read the unspoken language of body language and tension. The officiant's voice grew more formal as he approached the crucial moment. "Marriage is a sacred bond," he intoned, "a commitment made before God and these witnesses." He turned to face Ethan, his expression solemn. "Do you take this woman?" Vanessa leaned in close to Ethan, her lips barely moving as she whispered words meant only for him. "You handled that little dress fiasco well." Her voice was silk over steel. "After the honeymoon, we'll finally discuss where Lily fits into all this." Ethan remained still, his face unchanged, but his eyes moved down to Lily, taking in her bare feet in the grass, her small hand trustingly held in his, the dress her mother had chosen with so much love, the dress that represented everything pure and true about love, the kind of love that didn't need to be earned or proved or perfectly coordinated. The moment hung suspended in the warm afternoon air, weighted with unspoken words and imminent decisions. The officiant waited expectantly, Vanessa's fingers tightened possessively, and Lily's bare toes curled into the soft grass beside her father's polished shoes. The late afternoon sun seemed to hold its breath along with everyone else, as the officiant's question hung in the air. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan stood motionless at the altar, the weight of 200 expectant gazes pressing against him. His eyes moved slowly across the assembled guests, colleagues in expensive suits, Vanessa's society friends with their designer dresses and perfect makeup, distant relatives he barely knew. The string quartet had stopped playing, and the only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves in the vineyard breeze. His gaze shifted to Vanessa beside him, resplendent in her couture gown. She was everything that looked right on paper, successful, sophisticated, the perfect addition to his world of business meetings and charity galas. Her smile remained fixed in place, but there was a warning in her eyes now, a hardness that couldn't be disguised by even the finest makeup. Finally, Ethan looked down at Lily, still holding his hand. Her small fingers were slightly red from scrubbing the floor earlier, a detail that made his chest tighten. The cream-colored dress with its embroidered daisies moved gently around her ankles, her bare feet pressed into the grass, a picture of innocent trust that stood in stark contrast to the polished perfection surrounding them. The silence stretched longer. Someone coughed nervously in the crowd. Vanessa's fingers tightened on her bouquet, the white knuckles betraying her growing tension. The officiant shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Ethan and the notes in his hands. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was clear and steady, amplified by the microphone clipped to his lapel. "No." He paused, then added with quiet firmness, "Not her." The word rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Gasps erupted from multiple directions. Phones were raised higher, cameras clicking rapidly to capture the moment. In the front row, Vanessa's mother pressed a manicured hand to her throat, while her father's face turned an alarming shade of red. Vanessa's practiced smile crumpled at the edges before disappearing entirely. The bouquet trembled in her grip as she stared at Ethan, her expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and humiliation in rapid succession. "What are you doing?" she hissed, but her whisper was caught by the microphone, broadcasting her distress to the entire assembly. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. Guests leaned toward each other, whispering behind raised hands. The string quartet exchanged uncertain glances, their instruments held forgotten in their laps. Several of Vanessa's bridesmaids stepped forward uncertainly, their matching silk dresses rustling with the movement. Without another word, Ethan turned and walked down the aisle alone. His steps were measured and deliberate, his shoulders straight. The guests parted before him like a wave, creating a path through their midst. The officiant fumbled with his notes, papers spilling onto the grass as he tried to process this unprecedented turn of events. Photographers lowered their cameras slowly, as if unsure whether to continue documenting what had become something very different from the society wedding they'd been hired to capture. Their confusion was evident as they watched Ethan's retreating back. Claire stood near the arch, her clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Years of experience managing high-end weddings hadn't prepared her for this moment. She watched as Vanessa's assistant hurried forward, speaking urgently into a phone, while the catering staff hovered uncertainly near the reception tent. The crowd's whispers grew louder in Ethan's absence. Vanessa remained frozen at the altar, her expensive gown suddenly looking more like a costume than couture. Her mother had risen from her seat, gesturing frantically while her father was already on his phone, likely calling their lawyer. Then Ethan returned. This time, he held Lily's small hand firmly in his own as they walked together down the aisle. Her bare feet made no sound on the grass, but she kept pace with him, her chin lifted slightly. The cream-colored dress swished around her ankles, the embroidered daisies catching the late afternoon light. They stopped halfway down the aisle. Ethan turned to face the assembled guests, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone that was still attached to his lapel. "This little girl scrubbed floors on my wedding day because someone told her she didn't belong." His words fell into the shocked silence like stones. "If that's love, I want no part of it." Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding eye contact. Others stared openly, their expressions a mix of scandal and fascination. Near the back, a few of the catering staff exchanged knowing looks, having witnessed earlier events. Ethan's next words were quieter but no less firm. "Thank you all for coming." He gave a slight nod to the crowd, then turned his attention to Lily, guiding her gently toward the waiting car at the end of the aisle. Their steps were unhurried but purposeful, father and daughter walking away from the carefully orchestrated spectacle that had nearly trapped them both. Claire remained standing by the arch, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She watched as Lily glanced back once, catching her eye. The little girl's face held a mixture of relief and uncertainty, but there was something else there too. A flicker of hope that hadn't been present earlier when she'd been on her knees scrubbing wine from the floor. The security team materialized silently, forming a subtle barrier between the departing pair and anyone who might think to follow. The car door opened, and Ethan helped Lily inside before walking around to the driver's side. The engine started with a quiet purr that seemed extraordinarily loud in the stunned silence. The sun was setting over the vineyard, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges as Ethan's car wound its way through the familiar roads. His hands were steady on the steering wheel, though exhaustion pulled at the corners of his eyes. In the rearview mirror, he could see Lily curled up in the back seat, fast asleep. The sketchpad Claire had given her was tucked securely against her chest, like a shield protecting her dreams. The rhythmic sound of tires on pavement filled the car's interior, a gentle soundtrack to their journey home. Ethan's phone buzzed repeatedly in the cup holder, but he didn't glance at it. The day's events played through his mind like scenes from someone else's life. The shocked faces, Vanessa's crumpling smile, the whispers that had followed them down the aisle. But when he looked back at Lily's peaceful face in the mirror, he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. The house was dark and silent when they pulled into the driveway. Lily didn't stir as Ethan carefully lifted her from the back seat, her small body warm and trusting against his chest. The sketchpad slipped slightly, but her fingers maintained their grip even in sleep. He carried her through the quiet house, his footsteps echoing softly on the hardwood floors. In her room, the last rays of sunset filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the butterfly-patterned wallpaper. Ethan gently laid Lily on her bed, easing the sketchpad from her grasp and placing it on the nightstand. She mumbled something in her sleep as he pulled the covers up to her chin, but didn't wake. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her breathe, remembering how she'd looked scrubbing the floor in that gray uniform. His jaw tightened, but he forced the anger down. There would be time for that later. Downstairs in the kitchen, his phone had accumulated a small army of notifications. Vanessa's assistant's number appeared repeatedly in the missed calls list. Without hesitation, Ethan blocked it, then did the same for Vanessa's number and several others he recognized from her inner circle. The action felt like cutting away dead vines from healthy grapes, necessary and cleansing. As he scrolled through his messages, a few stood out from the sea of shocked inquiries and thinly veiled judgment. His cousin Maria had sent a simple, "You did the right thing. Call if you need anything." His old college roommate Mark wrote, "Proud of you, man. That took guts." These messages he kept, small lifelines of support in what he knew would be a challenging time ahead. A notification popped up. Vanessa had posted an Instagram story. Against his better judgment, Ethan opened it. Her words were carefully crafted, professionally vague. "Due to unforeseen circumstances, today's celebration has been postponed. I appreciate everyone's understanding during this private time." The post was accompanied by an artfully filtered photo of an empty champagne glass. As he watched, photos began disappearing from her profile. Every image that included Lily vanishing as if she'd never existed. Ethan set the phone face down on the counter and rubbed his temples. The house felt unusually quiet, the kind of silence that followed major decisions. He could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, a steady rhythm that had witnessed all the changes this home had seen. The unexpected sound of tires on gravel made him look up. Headlights swept across the kitchen windows, and a car door closed softly. Ethan wasn't surprised when a gentle knock followed. Somehow he'd known who it would be. Claire stood on the porch holding Lily's stuffed rabbit. The toy's floppy ears seemed to droop even more in the porch light. "She left this in the bridal suite," Claire said simply, her voice quiet in the evening air. Ethan stepped back, wordlessly inviting her in. They moved to the kitchen without discussion, falling into an odd but comfortable silence as Ethan filled the kettle and Claire sat at the counter, placing the rabbit carefully beside her. The familiar routine of making tea, selecting bags, warming cups, waiting for water to boil, gave their hands something to do while their minds processed the day's events. Steam rose from their cups, curling in the kitchen's dim light. Claire wrapped her hands around her mug, her normally professional demeanor softened by exhaustion and something else. Understanding, perhaps. The rabbit sat between them on the counter, a silent witness to their shared experience. Minutes passed, marked only by the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock and the occasional clink of cups against saucers. It was Claire who finally broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly in the quiet kitchen. She looked like she could breathe for the first time today. The simple observation hit Ethan like a physical force. He thought of Lily's face when he'd helped her change back into her mother's dress, the way her shoulders had relaxed, how she'd stood straighter despite her bare feet on the grass. His own breath caught slightly as he nodded. "So did I," he whispered back, and the truth of it settled around them like a warm blanket. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, carrying with it the unmistakable aroma of butter melting on a hot griddle. Ethan blinked awake, his mind taking a moment to process the cheerful sounds drifting up from downstairs. The clatter of plates, the whisk against a bowl, and most surprisingly, laughter. He pulled on a worn navy sweater over his t-shirt and made his way down the stairs, each step bringing the kitchen sounds into sharper focus. The sight that greeted him made him pause in the doorway, not wanting to disturb the scene before him. Claire and Lily stood side by side at the kitchen island, both wearing matching floral aprons that Ethan recognized from the back of the pantry, relics from a happier time. Lily's apron was comically large on her small frame, the hem nearly touching the floor, while Claire had neatly rolled the ties to make it fit. They were focused on a large mixing bowl, where Lily carefully added chocolate chips one by one as Claire stirred. "Remember," Claire was saying, her voice warm with amusement, The secret is to count exactly 7 chips for each pancake. That's what makes them magic. Lily's face was scrunched in concentration as she counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3. A few chips missed the bowl, scattering across the countertop like tiny brown marbles. This sent both of them into fits of giggles, the sound filling the kitchen with a lightness that had been missing for too long. "I see you found my secret pancake recipe," Ethan said, finally stepping into the kitchen. Lily spun around, her face lighting up. "Daddy, we're making magic pancakes." She held up a chocolate chip as evidence. "Claire says they make wishes come true." "Is that so?" Ethan raised an eyebrow at Claire, who shrugged with a slight blush. "Well, they haven't failed me yet," she replied, turning back to the griddle where several perfectly golden pancakes were already cooking. She moved with easy confidence in the kitchen, as if she'd been making breakfast here for years rather than hours. The kitchen island was dusted with flour, and measuring cups were scattered across the counter in cheerful disarray. A small vase of fresh flowers, likely picked from the garden that morning, sat in the center, adding a touch of color to the scene. The morning sun caught the petals, casting tiny shadows that danced across the granite surface. "Claire stayed in the guest house," Lily explained, returning to her careful chocolate chip counting. "We woke up early and picked flowers, and she showed me how to make heart shapes with the batter." Ethan noticed then that several of the cooling pancakes did indeed have distinctly heart-shaped edges, though some were more abstract than others. The sight of them brought an unexpected lump to his throat. It had been months since anyone had taken the time to make breakfast special for Lily. "The guest house was very comfortable, thank you," Claire added, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. "Though I think your daughter might have inherited your early bird tendencies. She was ready to start baking at dawn." Lily beamed at this comparison to her father, adding another chocolate chip to the bowl with extra flourish. The kitchen felt different this morning, warmer somehow, more lived in. The stark, magazine-worthy space that Vanessa had cultivated was softened by the evidence of actual cooking, actual living. They settled around the kitchen table where Claire had already set out plates, syrup, and fresh fruit. Lily insisted on serving everyone herself, proudly placing heart-shaped pancakes on each plate with careful consideration. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Lily's excited descriptions of their morning adventures in the garden. As they ate, Ethan found his eyes drawn to the room around them. The kitchen, like the rest of the house, had been designed to impress rather than comfort. Everything was sleek, modern, and carefully curated, a showpiece rather than a home. The warmth he felt this morning had nothing to do with the space itself. "Claire," he said during a lull in the conversation, "I've been thinking about making some changes around here." He gestured to the room. "The whole house, actually. It needs to feel more like, well, like this morning feels." Claire set down her fork, giving him her full attention. Her expression was professional but gentle, understanding the weight behind his words. "What kind of changes did you have in mind?" "Would you consider helping me redecorate? Not just the kitchen, but the entire estate." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how vulnerable the request felt. "I want it to feel like a home again, not a museum. You have an eye for that kind of thing. I've seen your work with the events you plan. The way you make spaces feel welcoming, lived in." Lily perked up at this suggestion. "Could I help too? I could draw pictures for the walls." Claire smiled at Lily before turning back to Ethan. Her response was measured, striking a careful balance between warmth and professionalism. "I'd be honored to help. We could start with a room-by-room assessment, see what spaces need the most attention." She glanced at Lily. "And yes, I think we definitely need an art consultant on this project." The rest of the morning passed in comfortable conversation, with Lily occasionally chiming in with increasingly elaborate decoration suggestions, including a proposal for a chocolate fountain in every room. Claire listened to each idea with genuine interest, gently steering the more outlandish ones toward more practical alternatives. After helping clean up the kitchen, despite Ethan's protests that guests shouldn't have to wash dishes, Claire gathered her things to leave. The early afternoon sun had warmed the driveway where her car waited, its shadow stretching across the gravel. Lily rushed forward to hug her goodbye, wrapping her small arms around Claire's waist. "Thank you for the magic pancakes," she whispered, though loud enough for Ethan to hear from where he stood in the doorway. Claire returned the hug with equal warmth, then straightened up, smoothing her dress. "I'll start putting together some ideas for the redesign," she said to Ethan, her professional tone returning, though her eyes remained soft. "We can meet next week to discuss the details." Ethan nodded, watching as she got into her car and drove away. Lily waved until the vehicle disappeared around the bend in the driveway, then turned to skip back inside, humming a tune under her breath. Standing there in the doorway, Ethan felt something settle in his chest, a recognition of what had been missing from these walls. The house already felt different, as if the morning's laughter and the smell of pancakes had begun to seep into its very foundation, marking the beginning of something new. The transformation of the Hayes estate began quietly but steadily. Each morning, Claire's car would appear in the driveway, and with it came a sense of purpose that filled the once hollow halls. She arrived with coffee for Ethan, hot chocolate for Lily, and a notepad filled with ideas that grew more detailed with each passing day. The first items to go were the marble sculptures that had dominated the entrance hall, cold, towering figures that had made Lily whisper whenever she passed them. Ethan watched as the moving crew carefully wrapped each piece, remembering how Vanessa had insisted they were conversation pieces. The only conversations they'd ever sparked were uncomfortable ones about their cost. "Good riddance," Lily declared as the last statue disappeared through the front door. She stood with her hands on her hips, wearing the oversized work gloves Claire had brought her. Though too big for any real work, they made her feel part of the team. The gold-trimmed curtains came down next, letting natural light flood the rooms for what felt like the first time in years. Claire stood on a ladder, carefully unclipping each panel while Ethan spotted her from below. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through fabric swatches Claire had brought for replacements. "What about this one, Daddy?" She held up a soft blue pattern. "It looks like the sky when we go hiking." Ethan smiled, remembering their weekend adventures that Vanessa had always declined to join. "I think that's perfect, sweetheart." Claire glanced down from her perch, her eyes crinkling with approval. "You've got a good eye, Lily. Those would work beautifully with the morning light in here." As they worked, laughter began to echo through the house again. It started small, Lily giggling when Claire accidentally tangled herself in a curtain, Ethan chuckling when they discovered a family of dust bunnies behind a particularly pretentious painting. But soon it grew, becoming as natural as breathing. One afternoon, while measuring the living room windows, Lily announced, "We should put my drawings up in our home now." The phrase "our home" fell from her lips easily, naturally, as if she'd never stopped using it. Ethan and Claire exchanged a glance, both noting the significance of those two simple words. The work brought them closer in unexpected ways. Claire and Ethan found themselves spending hours discussing paint colors, furniture arrangements, and the flow of spaces. But between discussions of warm versus cool tones, other conversations began to emerge. They were in the library, surrounded by paint samples and fabric swatches, when Claire paused in her measurements. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, and something about the quiet moment seemed to open a door. "I was engaged once," she said suddenly, her voice soft but steady. She kept her eyes on the measuring tape in her hands. "About 3 years ago." Ethan set down the color palette he'd been studying, giving her his full attention. He didn't speak, creating space for her to continue. He was successful, driven, always moving at full speed. Claire smiled slightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "He said I was too soft, too slow, too much somehow, while also never being enough." She ran her finger along the measuring tape's edge. He wanted everything to happen on his timeline. The wedding, the house, the future he'd planned. When I asked for time to think about things, to do them right, she shrugged. Well, that was the end of that. The library fell quiet except for the distant sound of Lily humming in the next room, where she was organizing her art supplies. Ethan watched Claire, noting how she held herself, straight-backed but not rigid, strong in her vulnerability. "He was wrong," Ethan said simply. Claire looked up then, meeting his eyes. I know that now, but it took time to believe it. She gestured to the room around them. That's why I love this work, creating spaces that feel right, that give people room to breathe, to think, to just be. No rushing, no forcing. Later that evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with 3 stories and 2 goodnight kisses, Claire and Ethan found themselves on the back porch. The day's work had left them tired but satisfied, and 2 glasses of wine sat between them on the small table Lily had helped pick out that morning. The vineyard stretched out before them, rows of vines disappearing into the twilight. A gentle breeze carried the scent of earth and roses from the garden, one of the few features of the estate that had always felt genuine, untouched by pretense. They sat in comfortable silence, letting the evening settle around them. Claire had kicked off her shoes, her feet tucked under her on the cushioned chair. A strand of hair had escaped her practical ponytail, and she made no move to fix it. Soft is what this house needed, Ethan said quietly, his words carrying clearly in the evening air. He turned his wine glass slowly, watching the liquid catch the last rays of sunlight. What we needed. The breeze rustled through the rose bushes, carrying their conversation away into the growing dusk. The morning sun filtered through the new curtains, casting gentle shadows across Ethan's desk as he sorted through the day's mail. Most were typical business correspondence, vineyard orders, supplier updates, charity event invitations. But one cream-colored envelope stood out, its paper thick and expensive, bearing the letterhead of Morrison and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Ethan's jaw tightened as he opened it, already suspecting its contents. The letter inside was typed in precise legal language, but its message was clear. Vanessa was demanding substantial compensation for what she termed public embarrassment and emotional damages, resulting from the canceled wedding. The amount listed made his eyes widen. It was clearly meant to hurt. He read through the carefully worded threats about exploring all available options and seeking appropriate remedies. The letter suggested that certain aspects of the prenuptial agreement might be subject to interpretation, particularly regarding public declarations and reputational harm. It was exactly the kind of manipulative move he should have expected from Vanessa. Lily's laughter drifted in from the garden where she was helping Claire plant new flowers. The sound strengthened his resolve. He reached for his phone and called Marcus Chen, his longtime friend and legal counsel. I need you to look at something, Ethan said after explaining the situation. How soon can you come by? Marcus arrived within the hour, his usual casual demeanor replaced by focused professionalism as he reviewed the letter. They sat in Ethan's study, the room now warmer and more inviting since Claire had helped redesign it with rich woods and comfortable leather chairs. Well, Marcus said, setting down the letter and removing his reading glasses, I can tell you right now that Morrison and Associates is grasping at straws. The prenup we drafted is airtight. I made sure of it. Ethan leaned back in his chair, some tension leaving his shoulders. They mentioned something about public declarations causing damages. Marcus shook his head. The prenup specifically protects both parties' right to end the engagement at any time, for any reason. Your statement at the wedding, while dramatic, was truthful and didn't violate any confidentiality clauses. He paused, his expression growing more serious. But Ethan, there's something else you should know. He pulled out his tablet and opened a file. When you asked me to review everything related to Vanessa, I did some deeper digging. 3 months before the wedding, she made several inquiries about exclusive boarding schools. He turned the tablet to show Ethan. All of them at least 500 miles away. Ethan felt his blood run cold as he scrolled through the emails. They were detailed discussions about admission requirements, academic programs, and most tellingly, mid-year transfer policies. All for schools that would have effectively removed Lily from his daily life. She never mentioned this to me, he said quietly, his hand gripping the tablet's edge. She was planning to send my daughter away without even discussing it? Marcus nodded grimly. Based on the correspondence, she was looking to enroll Lily as soon as possible after the wedding. She even requested information about their policies on limited parental contact during adjustment periods. The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. He thought of Lily in her cleaning uniform, of Vanessa's whispered comment at the altar about where Lily fits into all this. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. It had never been about blending their family. It had been about removing what Vanessa saw as an obstacle. Through the window, he could see Lily and Claire in the garden. They were planting tulip bulbs, Claire patiently showing Lily how to space them properly. His daughter's face was bright with concentration as she carefully measured the distance between each hole, just as Claire had demonstrated. "What do you recommend?" Ethan asked, turning back to Marcus. "Let me handle Morrison and Associates," Marcus replied, gathering his papers. "I'll remind them that any attempt to challenge the prenup would only result in these boarding school inquiries becoming part of the public record. I doubt Vanessa wants that kind of publicity." After Marcus left, Ethan sat at his desk for a long time, staring at Vanessa's number in his phone. The anger he felt wasn't hot or explosive. It was a cold, clarifying fury that made his next steps crystal clear. He opened their message thread and typed, "You erased yourself, not us." He hit send, then blocked and deleted her number without waiting for a response. It felt like closing a door that should have been shut long ago. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of work calls and vineyard management decisions. By the time evening approached, the letter from Morrison and Associates felt like a distant, unpleasant memory. Ethan was reviewing the week's harvest reports when Lily appeared in his study doorway, still wearing the gardening apron Claire had given her. It was covered in dirt smudges and had "Junior Landscaper" embroidered across the front. "Daddy?" she asked, fidgeting with one of the apron pockets. "Is Claire coming for dinner again tonight?" The question made Ethan pause. Claire had been joining them for dinner more frequently lately, usually after long days of working on the house. Each time, the meals were filled with easy conversation and genuine laughter, so different from the formal, tense affairs they'd endured with Vanessa. He thought about how Claire always listened intently to Lily's stories about school, how she remembered every detail about Lily's art projects, how she made sure to bring decaf hot chocolate for their evening chats. He thought about the way she'd helped create spaces in their home that felt truly lived in, not just looked at. "I hope so, sweetheart," Ethan smiled, watching his daughter's face light up at the response. The morning of Lily's birthday dawned with a gentle warmth that seemed to embrace the Hayes estate. Ethan stood at the kitchen window, watching the early light catch on the dew-covered grass, his coffee growing cold in his hands. This day carried so much weight. The first birthday since Sarah's passing. The first celebration since the wedding that wasn't. The first true test of their new normal. He'd deliberately kept the guest list small, just a handful of Lily's closest friends from school, her favorite aunt and uncle, and Claire. No catering staff, no elaborate entertainment, no pressure to perform for social media. Just genuine people who loved Lily for who she was. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made him turn. Lily appeared in her favorite pajamas, the ones with tiny paintbrushes printed all over them. Her eyes were still sleepy, but there was an unmistakable excitement in her movements. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Ethan said softly, opening his arms. Lily ran into them, burying her face in his shirt. He held her close, remembering how Sarah used to wake Lily on her birthdays with butterfly kisses and silly songs. "Is Claire coming early to help?" Lily asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "She should be here any minute," Ethan replied, checking his watch. As if on cue, they heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Claire arrived carrying an armload of sunflowers and a box of paper lanterns. Her hair was pulled back in a casual braid, and she wore comfortable clothes perfect for party setup. The sight of her, so at ease in their space, so different from Vanessa's carefully curated appearances, made something warm settle in Ethan's chest. "Birthday girl," Claire called out, setting down her supplies to give Lily a proper hug. "Ready to make this garden magical?" They spent the morning transforming the back garden into a whimsical celebration space. Claire had a natural eye for creating comfort and beauty without ostentation. She showed Lily how to arrange the sunflowers in mason jars, their bright faces catching the light. Together they strung paper lanterns between the trees, creating delicate chains of light that would glow as evening approached. Ethan watched them work, struck by how seamlessly they moved together. Claire never talked down to Lily or dismissed her ideas. Instead, she incorporated Lily's suggestions with genuine enthusiasm, making the decoration process feel like a collaborative art project. By early afternoon, the garden had become a warm, inviting space that felt nothing like the formal events that used to dominate their home. Checkered blankets dotted the grass for picnic-style seating. A simple wooden table held homemade cupcakes that Lily had helped frost, each one uniquely decorated. Garden games like ring toss and croquet were set up on the lawn, ready for children to play freely. The party itself was everything Ethan had hoped for: joyful chaos without pretense. Kids ran through the garden playing tag, their laughter echoing across the vineyard. Adults sat on blankets, sharing stories and simple food. No one was trying to network or impress, they were just there to celebrate Lily. When it came time for gifts, Lily sat cross-legged on a blanket, surrounded by her friends. She opened each present with genuine appreciation, taking time to thank everyone properly, something Sarah had always insisted on. But when she reached Claire's gift wrapped in paper covered with tiny sketched flowers, she paused. Claire sat nearby, trying to appear casual but clearly nervous. The package was flat and square, obviously a frame of some kind. Lily carefully peeled back the paper, and her eyes widened. Inside was one of Lily's own drawings from the sketchpad Claire had given her months ago. But Claire had done more than simply frame it. She'd had it professionally matted and preserved, treating it with the respect usually reserved for fine art. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house, with a bright sun overhead and flowers all around. Lily had drawn it weeks ago, during one of their quiet evenings together. "I found it in your sketchpad when you showed me your art last week," Claire explained softly. "I hope it was okay to borrow it for framing. I thought it deserved to be displayed properly." Lily stared at the frame, her fingers tracing the glass. Then she launched herself at Claire, wrapping her arms around her neck in a fierce hug. "It's perfect," she whispered. Ethan watched the moment unfold, his throat tight with emotion. He recognized the figures in the drawing. It wasn't hard to guess who the 3 people were supposed to be. The fact that Claire had seen it, understood its significance, and chosen to honor it in this way spoke volumes about her heart. The party continued into the evening, the paper lanterns casting a warm glow as darkness fell. Eventually, the last guests departed, leaving behind the comfortable mess of a celebration well enjoyed. Lily fell asleep on one of the blankets, clutching her new frame even in sleep. After carrying Lily to bed, Ethan found Claire gathering leftover cupcakes in the kitchen. Without a word, he handed her a small package, simple brown paper tied with twine. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Open it," he said quietly. Claire carefully untied the string and unwrapped the paper. Inside was a silver frame, elegant but not flashy. It held a photo taken earlier that day, Claire and Ethan sitting with Lily between them on a picnic blanket, all 3 laughing at something now forgotten. The sun had been setting, casting them in golden light. Below the photo was a single word, engraved in simple script: "Us." Claire's fingers trembled slightly as they traced the frame. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't try to hide them. These weren't the careful, camera-ready tears Vanessa had perfected. They were real, raw, beautiful in their honesty. They moved to the back porch without discussing it, settling into the comfortable chairs they'd picked out together months ago. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. The space between them felt charged with possibility, but neither rushed to close it. Instead, they sat in comfortable silence, the new frame resting between them, their hands close but not quite touching. The moment felt precious precisely because it wasn't forced, just like everything else that had grown between them over these months. Not rushed, just real. The late summer evening painted the vineyard hills in shades of amber and gold as Ethan paced in his office. He'd already changed his shirt 3 times, settling finally on a simple blue button-down that Sarah had always said brought out his eyes. His phone sat on the desk, Claire's number pulled up but not yet dialed. He ran a hand through his hair, feeling oddly like a teenager again. This shouldn't be so difficult. He'd known Claire for months now, had shared countless conversations over paint swatches and furniture arrangements. Yet this felt different, weightier somehow. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the phone and pressed call before he could second-guess himself again. "Hello?" Claire's voice was warm, familiar. "Claire, hi." Ethan cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might be free tomorrow evening?" "I should be. What's up?" "I thought maybe—" He paused, reminding himself that he wasn't asking for a business meeting. "I'd like to take you to dinner, as a thank you, for everything with Lily's birthday, and, well, everything else too." There was a brief silence on the other end, and Ethan felt his heart skip. Then Claire's voice returned, touched with a smile he could hear. "I'd like that." "Great," he said, perhaps too quickly. "There's this place in town, Angelo's. Nothing fancy, but they make incredible pasta. 7 o'clock?" 7 sounds perfect. After they hung up, Ethan sat at his desk, a mix of excitement and nervousness settling in his stomach. He hadn't dated since Sarah, hadn't wanted to. The few attempts Vanessa had made to set him up before they got together had felt forced, mechanical. This felt different, natural if slightly terrifying. The next evening, Ethan arranged for Lily to have a sleepover at her best friend Emma's house. She'd given him a knowing look as he dropped her off, far too perceptive for her age. "Have fun with Claire, Daddy," she'd said with a grin that reminded him so much of Sarah. Angelo's was a small, family-owned restaurant tucked away on a quiet street, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk through windows draped with vintage lace curtains. Ethan arrived early, choosing a corner table that offered both privacy and a view of the restaurant's small courtyard garden. When Claire walked in, Ethan felt his breath catch. She wasn't dressed formally, just a simple sundress in a soft shade of green, but she carried herself with a natural grace that made the restaurant's other patrons fade into the background. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she wore minimal makeup, so different from Vanessa's carefully constructed appearances. "Hi," she said softly as she reached the table. Ethan stood, almost knocking over his water glass in his haste. "Hi, you look beautiful." A slight blush colored Claire's cheeks as she sat down. "Thank you. This place is lovely. I've driven past it so many times but never been in." It was Sarah's favorite, Ethan said, then immediately wondered if he shouldn't have mentioned his late wife. But Claire's expression showed only gentle understanding. "Tell me about her," she said, reaching for her menu but keeping her eyes on him. What did she love about it? The question opened something in Ethan's chest. Most people awkwardly changed the subject when Sarah came up, but Claire leaned in, genuinely wanting to know. "She loved that it wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was," he said, looking around at the mismatched chairs and hand-painted murals. "No pretense, just good food and warm hearts. We used to bring Lily here when she was tiny. The owner would let her help make pizza dough in the kitchen." Claire smiled. "That sounds exactly like Lily. She has such a helper's heart." Their conversation flowed easily after that, pausing only when their food arrived. Handmade fettuccine for Claire, lasagna for Ethan. They shared bites of each other's dishes and stories of their childhoods. Claire's summers spent at her grandmother's lake house. Ethan's first job picking grapes at a neighbor's vineyard. "That's actually what made me want to own a vineyard someday," Ethan admitted, twirling pasta on his fork. "Not the back-breaking work. That part was terrible. But the way the whole community came together during harvest season. Everyone helping everyone else, sharing meals between the rows of vines. It felt real." Claire nodded. "That's what I loved about my grandmother's lake house. Nothing fancy, just a small cabin really, but it was filled with so much life. We'd spend evenings playing board games by lamplight because the electricity was spotty. Somehow those were the best nights." As their plates were cleared, Ethan found himself sharing things he hadn't voiced to anyone. "You know what terrifies me most about the whole thing with Vanessa?" he said quietly. "Not that I almost married the wrong person, though that's bad enough. It's that I almost let someone make Lily feel unwanted in her own home. I was so caught up in the idea of giving her a mother figure that I didn't see what was really happening." Claire reached across the table, her fingers lightly touching his wrist. "Hey, you stopped it. The moment you saw what was happening, you acted. That's what matters." "Because of you," Ethan said, meeting her eyes. That sketch pad you gave her. It was the first crack in the facade. You saw her, really saw her, when I was too blind to notice she was fading. I saw you both, Claire said softly. Two people with so much love to give, trying to fit yourselves into someone else's idea of perfect. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the restaurant's soft music filling the space between them. Finally, Ethan spoke again. This was supposed to be a thank you dinner, but I'm not sure I've actually said thank you yet. Claire's smile was gentle. You didn't need to. This wasn't really about saying thank you, was it? Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest at her perceptiveness. No, he admitted. It wasn't. As they left the restaurant, the evening air was cool and sweet with the scent of nearby jasmine. Ethan's hand moved toward Claire's almost of its own accord, but he caught himself and pulled back, suddenly uncertain. Claire looked at him for a moment, her eyes soft in the streetlight. Then, without a word, she reached out and took his hand in hers. Her fingers were warm and sure as they laced through his, and something settled in Ethan's heart, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. They stood there in the quiet street, hands linked, neither rushing to move or speak. The moment held its own kind of perfection, unhurried and real. The next morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Lily's room. Claire stood in the doorway, surveying the bare walls that would soon transform from their current bland beige to something magical. She had arrived early, armed with paint cans, brushes, and a determination to help create the perfect space for this little girl who had claimed a piece of her heart. Are you sure about the blue? Claire asked Lily, who was practically bouncing with excitement in her paint-splattered overalls. Sky blue, like when we lay in the grass and watch clouds. Lily nodded emphatically, clutching her sketchpad where she'd drawn her vision for the room. Ethan appeared behind them, already wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt. I moved all the furniture to the center, he said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Though I'm not sure I trust myself with a paintbrush. Claire laughed, handing him a roller. Just try not to paint yourself instead of the walls. They started with the primer, working in comfortable synchronization. Lily insisted on helping with the lower portions of the walls, her small tongue sticking out in concentration as she carefully guided her brush along the baseboards. Claire showed her how to avoid drips, while Ethan tackled the higher sections with his roller. Dad, you're doing it wrong. Lily giggled as paint droplets spattered onto Ethan's shirt. Am I? He grinned mischievously, deliberately flicking his roller to send tiny dots of white primer toward Lily, who squealed and ducked behind Claire. Don't you dare start a paint war, Claire warned, trying to sound stern but failing to hide her smile. We actually need some of this paint to end up on the walls. The morning passed in a blur of laughter and teamwork. Once the primer dried, they began applying the sky blue paint Lily had chosen. The color transformed the room with each stroke, bringing life to the previously sterile space. Claire showed Lily how to create texture in certain areas to make the walls look more like real sky. Look, it's like when clouds are really fluffy, Lily exclaimed, watching Claire demonstrate the technique. Ethan paused his rolling to watch them, something warm settling in his chest at the sight of Claire patiently guiding Lily's small hands. This was what his home had been missing. Not the perfect staging Vanessa had insisted upon, but the messy, joyful process of creating something together. By early afternoon, the blue paint had dried enough for them to start on the mural. Claire sketched out a large tree on one wall, its branches reaching toward the ceiling. Lily helped paint the trunk, mixing browns and grays to create texture in the bark. Ethan, despite his protests about lacking artistic ability, proved surprisingly adept at filling in the leafy canopy. Now for the best part, Claire announced, pulling out packages of cloud and star stickers. Lily's eyes widened with delight. They worked together to place the stickers strategically around the room, creating patterns that would catch the light at different times of day. Some clouds they positioned near the tree, others they scattered across the remaining walls. The stars were saved for the ceiling where they would glow softly at night. During a quiet moment, while Ethan went to get more water for their brushes, Lily turned to Claire. Her small face was serious, paint smudged across one cheek. You're like sunshine on a rainy day, she said simply, wrapping her arms around Claire's waist. Claire felt tears prick at her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, hiding her emotion behind a warm smile as she hugged Lily back. The simple honesty of children could undo the strongest defenses, and Lily's words had struck directly at Claire's heart. They finished the room as evening approached, adding final touches and cleaning up paint supplies. Lily insisted on keeping her paint-stained overalls as a memory of the best day ever. After a simple dinner of delivered pizza, eaten picnic-style on the floor of Lily's newly transformed room, it was time for bed. Claire helped Lily into her pajamas while Ethan cleaned up the last of the paint trays. The little girl climbed into bed, still chattering excitedly about her new room. "Can you read me a story?" she asked Claire, pulling out a well-worn book of fairy tales. "Of course," Claire replied, settling beside Lily on the bed. She opened the book, and Lily snuggled close, pointing to her favorite story. As Claire's voice filled the room with tales of far-off places and magical adventures, she didn't immediately notice Ethan's return. He stood quietly in the hallway, watching through the partially open door. The sight before him, Claire reading animatedly while Lily followed along, both of them bathed in the soft glow of the bedside lamp, created an ache in his chest he hadn't expected. Claire glanced up mid-sentence and caught his eye. Something passed between them in that moment. A recognition that this scene wasn't just a temporary arrangement or a kind gesture from a friend. This was what home felt like. This was what family could be. Quietly closing the book, Claire gave Lily a gentle kiss on the forehead. "Time for sleep, sweet girl. Dream about your beautiful new room." Lily was already drifting off, tired from the day's activities. Claire carefully stood and made her way to the door where Ethan waited. Their eyes met again, and in the soft darkness of the hallway, both understood that everything had shifted. This was no longer temporary. The morning sun cast long shadows across the vineyard estate as Ethan and Lily worked together in their garden. They had started this project last week, a small patch where they planned to grow vegetables and flowers. Lily wore her favorite gardening overalls, the ones still speckled with blue paint from decorating her room, while Ethan knelt beside her, showing her how to properly plant tomato seedlings. "Gentle with the roots," he reminded her, watching as Lily carefully placed a tiny plant into the hole she'd dug. "That's perfect, sweetie." The peaceful morning shattered when Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from security. Vanessa was at the front gate, requesting entry. Ethan's jaw tightened as he read the message. He hadn't expected this. Not after 3 weeks of silence following her lawyer's failed attempts to challenge the prenup. "Lily," he said softly, "why don't you go inside and get us some water? We could use a little break." Lily looked up at him, dirt smudged across her cheek. Something in his tone made her pause, but she nodded and headed toward the house. Ethan watched her go, then texted security to allow Vanessa through, with strict instructions that she had 1 minute, no more. He stood in the garden, hands still covered in soil, as Vanessa's sleek black car pulled up the driveway. She emerged looking exactly as he remembered, perfectly styled in an expensive white pantsuit, not a hair out of place. But now, instead of seeing elegance, all Ethan noticed was the artifice. "Ethan," she said, her voice carrying that practiced warmth that once fooled him. "You look rustic." Her eyes took in his dirt-stained jeans and work boots with barely concealed disdain. "Your minute started when you stepped out of the car," he replied evenly. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I've been thinking about everything," she began, taking a step forward. "The media has painted me as some sort of villain, but they don't know the whole story. I was just trying to help Lily adjust to our new life together. Perhaps my methods were misguided, but my intentions were good." Inside the house, Lily stood at the window of her newly painted room, watching. The blue walls seemed to wrap around her protectively as she observed the scene below. She didn't feel scared anymore when she saw Vanessa, the woman who had made her scrub floors and hide her mother's dress. Instead, she felt safe, knowing her father stood firm in the garden. "I brought peace offerings," Vanessa continued, gesturing to her car where an expensive-looking bouquet sat on the passenger seat. "For both you and Lily. I thought we could talk about fixing things, starting fresh. Everyone deserves a second chance, don't they? Ethan looked at the flowers, then back at Vanessa. His voice when he spoke was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You didn't break a relationship," he said. "You broke a little girl's trust. That doesn't get fixed with flowers and excuses." Vanessa's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. "That's rather dramatic, don't you think? Children are resilient. They forget." "No," Ethan cut her off. "They don't forget. They learn. And what you taught Lily was that she needed to earn love by making herself smaller. That's not a lesson I'll ever let her learn again." "You're making this impossible." Vanessa's voice took on an edge of frustration. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, to make amends." "Your minute is up," Ethan said simply. He turned away from her, back toward his garden, back toward the home he was building with love rather than appearance. Vanessa stood there for a moment longer, her humiliation barely contained beneath a mask of practiced grace. "Well," she said to his back, "I suppose this shows everyone who you really are." "Yes," Ethan agreed without turning around. "It does." He heard her car door slam, the engine start, the sound of tires on gravel as she drove away. Only then did he look up at Lily's window, where his daughter still stood watching. She gave him a small wave and he smiled, heading inside to find her. That evening, after dinner, Ethan sat with Lily in the living room. The setting sun painted the walls in warm oranges and golds, so different from the cold elegance that used to define their home. "She won't be back," he told Lily, who was curled up next to him on the couch. Lily nodded, seeming to process this information. Then she reached for her ever-present sketch pad and colored pencils. "Can I draw something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "I want to draw our family," she said, already starting to sketch. "Just you and me and Claire." Ethan watched as Lily's small hands moved across the paper with purpose, creating 3 figures standing together. She drew herself in the middle, holding hands with both Ethan and Claire. Above them, she carefully drew a big sun, its rays extending down to touch each person. "Is that what family looks like to you?" he asked softly. Lily nodded, adding final touches to her drawing. "It's what it feels like," she corrected him, continuing to color with careful concentration. "Like warm sunshine all the time." The evening settled over the vineyard like a soft blanket, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. The late summer air carried the sweet scent of ripening grapes and fresh-cut grass as Ethan and Claire sat together on the stone patio. They had just finished clearing away the dinner dishes, working in comfortable synchronization, Claire washing while Ethan dried, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that still made both their hearts skip. Through the open French doors, the gentle notes of Lily's piano practice drifted out. She was working on a simple melody, one that her mother had started teaching her years ago. The sound wrapped around them like a tender embrace, punctuated by occasional pauses and restarts as Lily worked through the challenging parts. Claire leaned back in her chair, letting the last rays of sunlight warm her face. She had kicked off her shoes, and her bare feet rested comfortably on the cool stone. Beside her, Ethan watched her with quiet wonder, taking in how the golden light caught in her hair and softened her features. She looked completely at home here, as if she had always belonged in this space. "You know," Ethan said softly, his voice barely carrying over Lily's playing, "I've been thinking a lot lately about what it means to really live." Claire turned to face him, her eyes catching his. She didn't speak, giving him the space to continue. "After Sarah died," he continued, referring to his late wife, "everything became about survival, getting through each day, making sure Lily was okay, trying to keep our world from falling apart." He paused, listening as Lily hit a particularly beautiful sequence of notes. "I thought that's what life would be forever. Just surviving." Claire reached over and placed her hand over his where it rested on the armrest. Her touch was gentle, grounding. "Then Vanessa came along," he said, shaking his head slightly. "And I confused surviving with living. I thought if I could just create this perfect-looking life, somehow that would make everything okay. But it was still just survival, just dressed up in designer clothes and marble countertops. Inside, Lily's playing grew more confident, the melody flowing more smoothly now. The setting sun cast long shadows across the patio, but neither Ethan nor Claire moved to turn on the outdoor lights. There was something sacred about this moment in the gathering dusk. But lately, Ethan's voice grew softer, more intimate. I've realized I'm not just surviving anymore. For the first time since Sarah, I'm actually living. He turned his hand over beneath Claire's, intertwining their fingers. And it's not because everything's perfect or polished, it's because everything finally feels real. Claire squeezed his hand gently, her eyes glistening in the fading light. Real is better than perfect, she whispered. You taught me that, he said, smiling. You and Lily both. You showed me that love isn't about maintaining appearances or meeting expectations. It's about pancake batter on the ceiling and paint-splattered overalls and reading the same bedtime story 3 times in a row because it makes her laugh. Inside, Lily hit a wrong note, and her giggle floated out to them. The sound made both Ethan and Claire smile, their hearts full with the simple joy of it. Ethan shifted in his chair, turning to face Claire more fully. His free hand reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, lingering there for a moment. I know this might seem fast to some people, he said, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness now. And I don't have everything figured out. I don't even have a ring yet. Claire's breath caught slightly as she realized where this was going. Her hand tightened unconsciously around his. But I know what I want, he continued, his voice growing stronger with certainty. I want this. Us. I want morning coffee and evening talks. I want paint-covered weekends and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. I want to keep building this life we've started. He paused, taking a deep breath. Would you maybe want to keep building it with us? Officially? The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant pinks and purples as Claire looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. She didn't speak. Words seemed inadequate for everything she was feeling. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, pouring all her answer into that kiss. Inside, Lily hit another wrong note on the piano, followed by more giggles. The sound of her laughter mingled with the chirping of evening crickets and the rustle of grapevines in the gentle breeze. As Claire and Ethan separated, their foreheads resting together, peace settled over them like a blessing. The night continued to deepen around them, stars beginning to peek out in the darkening sky. But they stayed there, hands clasped, hearts full, surrounded by the music of their daughter's laughter and the promise of all the days to come. 6 months had passed since that evening on the patio, and the vineyard had transformed with the changing seasons. Spring had painted the landscape in vibrant greens and delicate blossoms, with rows of grapevines stretching toward the warming sun. At the heart of the estate, a young apple tree stood proudly, its branches swaying gently in the morning breeze. The tree had been planted just weeks ago, a symbol of fresh starts and growing roots. Around the tree, simple white chairs formed an intimate semicircle on the grass. Mason jars filled with wildflowers hung from shepherd's hooks along the aisle, catching the morning light. Everything about the setup spoke of intentional simplicity. No crystal chandeliers, no elaborate floral arches, no red carpet. Just nature's own decorations, enhanced by thoughtful touches that made the space feel like home. In the guest cottage, Claire stood before a full-length mirror while Lily twirled beside her. The girl's dress was a masterpiece of joy, covered in carefully embroidered wildflowers that she had chosen herself. Blues, purples, and yellows danced across the fabric, each flower representing a different memory they'd shared as a family. Lily had spent weeks with the seamstress, pointing out exactly where each bloom should go, telling stories about why each one mattered. "Look at this one," Lily said, pointing to a purple thistle near her hem. "It's like the ones we found on our first hike together." Her voice carried the confidence of someone who knew, without doubt, that she belonged. Claire knelt beside her, adjusting a ribbon in Lily's hair. "And this forget-me-not?" she asked, touching a tiny blue flower near Lily's shoulder. "From the day you helped me paint my room," Lily answered, beaming. "The paint got everywhere, remember?" Claire laughed, the sound mixing with birdsong through the open window. Her own dress was simple, ivory silk that flowed like water, with delicate lace that reminded her of her grandmother's tablecloths. No designer labels, no $1,000 price tag. Just something that felt right when she tried it on. A knock at the door made them both turn. Ethan stood in the doorway, dressed in a light gray suit that matched the casual elegance of the day. In his hand, he held a small velvet box. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, just a simple navy blue square that held something precious inside. "I have something for both my girls," he said softly, stepping into the room. The morning light caught the emotion in his eyes as he looked at them, his daughter and his bride, both glowing with genuine happiness. He opened the box, revealing 2 delicate necklaces. Each held a tiny apple blossom charm, crafted in silver and pearl. "To match our tree," he explained, his voice thick with feeling. "New beginnings." As he helped fasten the necklaces around their necks, cars began crunching up the gravel driveway. Through the window, they could see their guests arriving, faces filled with real joy, not social obligation. Claire's parents stepped out of their old station wagon, her mother already dabbing at her eyes. Ethan's sister Sarah emerged from another car carrying a homemade cake decorated with fresh flowers. Lily's art teacher, Ms. Peterson, arrived with a canvas tucked under her arm, clearly a gift created with love. The guests gathered naturally, greeting each other with warm hugs and genuine laughter. There was no receiving line, no formal seating chart, no hired photographers circling like hawks. Just a friend with a good camera, ready to capture honest moments. The morning air filled with acoustic guitar as their friend David began playing. Not a traditional wedding march, but a gentle melody he had composed himself. The music floated through the vineyard like a spring breeze, setting the perfect tone for what was to come. Claire stood at the start of the aisle watching as Lily began her walk. The girl moved with pure joy, tossing rose petals with careful attention to make sure every section of the path got its fair share. Her face split into a wide grin as she caught Ethan's eye at the front, and she added a little skip to her step that made everyone chuckle softly. Then it was Claire's turn. She began her walk alone, a choice that felt right to her. This wasn't about being given away. It was about walking freely toward the family she had chosen. The morning sun filtered through the apple tree's branches, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across her dress. Each step felt grounded, real, completely her own. Ethan waited beneath the apple tree, his eyes never leaving Claire's. There was no practiced pose, no camera-ready smile, just raw emotion written across his face as he watched her approach. Lily stood beside him, practically bouncing with excitement, her hand already reaching out for Claire's. When Claire reached them, they formed a small circle, not the traditional bride and groom arrangement, but something that felt true to who they were. The officiant, a kind-faced woman who had known Ethan's family for years, smiled warmly at their unconventional setup. Ethan pulled out his handwritten vows, not on fancy cardstock but on paper from Lily's sketchbook. His hands shook slightly as he unfolded it. "Claire," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet gathering, "I promise to love you in the messy moments as much as the perfect ones, to celebrate paint-splattered Sundays and burnt pancake Mondays, to never take for granted the way you make our house feel like home." Claire's vows were written on the back of a paint swatch, sage green, the color they'd chosen together for the living room. "Ethan," she read, her voice steady despite her tears, "I promise to always see the beauty in our imperfect moments, to love your strength and your softness equally, to keep building this life with you, one real moment at a time." Then together they turned to Lily. The 3 of them had practiced this part, but the emotion still caught in their throats. Ethan held both their hands, his daughter's small one and his bride's trembling one, and spoke the words they'd written together. "This is a marriage between hearts, and ours have already been home." The applause that followed was soft but filled with sniffles and happy tears. Sunlight streamed through the apple blossoms above them, casting gentle shadows on their joined hands. There were no camera flashes, no drone of media helicopters, no need to pose or perform, just pure, unfiltered joy shared among those who mattered most. The evening air grew soft and sweet as the sun began to set over the vineyard. Under the young apple tree, where just hours ago they had exchanged their vows, Ethan, Claire, and Lily sat barefoot in the grass. Paper plates balanced on their laps held homemade cupcakes, each one decorated with wildflowers that matched Lily's dress. Lily took an enthusiastic bite of her cupcake, managing to get vanilla frosting all over her nose in the process. Her eyes crinkled with pure joy as she looked up at Claire, who held an old Polaroid camera, a wedding gift from her father who remembered her childhood love of instant photos. The camera clicked and whirred, capturing Lily's laughter-filled face in perfect timing. Claire gently pulled the developing photo from the camera, watching as the image slowly appeared. The three of them huddled close, watching the magic of the moment materializing on the small square of film. Lily's unbridled happiness frozen in time, the sunset casting a golden glow around her. "Look at your nose," Ethan chuckled, reaching over to wipe a dot of frosting from Lily's face with his thumb. She giggled and ducked away, protecting her cupcake from any potential confiscation. Inside the house, the reception was winding down naturally, without any formal announcements or scheduled endings. Through the open windows, they could hear the gentle murmur of conversation mixing with soft music. Some guests were helping to pack away leftover food, while others sat in comfortable clusters, sharing stories and laughter. The hallway leading to the living room had already been transformed. A new photo hung proudly on the wall, their official wedding portrait taken just hours ago. Unlike traditional wedding photos with stiff poses and forced smiles, this one captured them in a moment of genuine connection. They stood wrapped in each other's arms, their faces bright with authentic joy. Lily stood between them, one hand holding Claire's, the other clutching Ethan's, creating a perfect circle of love. Next to this fresh memory hung two powerful reminders of their journey. The first was Lily's original sketch, drawn in crayon on paper from her beloved sketchpad. The simple figures, three stick people holding hands under a bright sun, represented her dream of what their family could be. The childish artwork had been professionally framed, given the same importance as any masterpiece. Beside it, preserved behind museum-quality glass, hung the gray cleaning uniform, the one Lily had been forced to wear at the almost wedding that never was. Rather than hide this painful memory, they chose to display it as a testament to their strength, to the moment when Ethan chose love over appearances, and to remind them always of what truly matters. Back under the apple tree, the evening grew cooler. Lily nestled into Claire's lap, her eyes growing heavy after the excitement of the day. Her flower girl dress spread out around them like a garden come to life, each embroidered bloom telling its own story of their path to becoming a family. "This feels like forever," Lily whispered, her voice soft and drowsy. The words carried the weight of a child who had learned early that some things don't last, but who had also learned that real love finds its way home. Claire pressed a gentle kiss to Lily's forehead, breathing in the sweet smell of cake and childhood. Her wedding dress pooled around them both, no longer pristine but perfectly lived in, marked with grass stains and frosting, evidence of a day truly lived rather than merely performed. Ethan reached for a blanket they'd brought outside, one of the soft quilts Claire's mother had made as a wedding gift. He wrapped it carefully around his wife and daughter, tucking it snugly around their shoulders. The fabric was warm with love and intention, each square pieced together with care, just like their family. They sat together under the emerging stars, surrounded by the subtle sounds of joy drifting from the house. No one was performing for social media. No photographers were demanding poses. No society columns were waiting to critique every detail. Instead, genuine laughter floated on the evening breeze, carrying with it the quiet contentment of people who loved them for exactly who they were. The joy they built didn't shout for attention or beg to be noticed. It simply existed, steady and true, in every small moment they shared. It lived in the way Lily's hand naturally found Claire's, in the gentle way Ethan adjusted the blanket, in the peaceful silence that wrapped around them like an embrace. They didn't build a life to impress the world. They built one that could never be taken away. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan and Lily, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it. Click here to watch it.